Hi, everybody. I'm Anne-Marie Runfola. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Coastal Studies. Happy Right Whale Day. Woo! Where is Matt Delaney? Where are you? Are you here? Somebody thought he was sighted. He was here? Is he hiding? He's coming back? Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Well, maybe it can help me remember to honor him later because he helped start Right Whale Day. Was it 4 years ago? Something like that. It wasn't that long ago, but it's become a tradition now, which is really exciting. This is our 50th anniversary this year. Thank you. We're really excited. 50 years of research, rescue, and education. And thank you to those of you who've been part of it. Who is a member here or a supporter of some sort? Raise your hand proudly. Get them up there. All right. Okay, when you take them down, who's left? All right. Good. Come and see me right afterwards. Thank you. Thank you very much, supporters. And also, could our staff please raise their hands? Thank you. Raise them proudly. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. And our volunteers. There's some in the back and here. Thank you so much for your service. Board members. Yay, Herb, thank you. Herb and Liza holding down the fort. And anyone else that I haven't... advisory council members, raise your hand. There you go. Wonderful. Hey, nice to see you. Our faithfuls, thank you so much. The people that just raised their hands, please, definitely any of them, please pump them for information, questions, get to know them. We're a wonderful team and family, and welcome all of you. It takes all of you to achieve this mission, to understand, preserve, and protect our marine and coastal resources, our ecosystems in our environment. And we do that through research, rescue, and education and marine policy. And here's to 50 more years of that. Thank you. For the benefit of all of us. I want to thank Provincetown Television, PTV, for being here. Thank you so much. That's great. Nate and Colin. We got the camera person to say their name. Thanks, Colin. And also to the staff who organized this, especially Laura Stinson, our Assistant Director of Development. Where is she? Oh, in the back. Yay. I promised her I wouldn't make her come up and sing karaoke. Or karaoke, for those of us who lived in Japan. I'd also like to thank our panelists. So thank you. Were you going to get introduced? Wait, give a little. Okay, cheers. They're going to be introduced in a minute. And I am going to thank our moderator by also introducing Leah Crowe. Yeah, come on. I like lots of audience participation. Could you tell I have an education background also? All right. I need my glasses for this one. All right, Leah Crowe is with the Protected Species Science and Monitoring as the lead with the Division of Marine Fisheries for Massachusetts State. Leah oversees large whale and sea turtle research programs for Mass DMF, applying ecological knowledge to inform conservation and management. She holds a PhD from the University of Otago. Oh, yes, there you go. Where she studied critically endangered bottlenose dolphins in New Zealand. Leah first came to Cape Cod through her work with the Center for Coastal Studies as an aerial observer in the right whale program and a research assistant with the humpback whale program. And how many have been interns here with us? There you go. There's some in the back there. Everywhere I go in the world, I meet at least one CCS intern. So I'm going to turn it over now to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. All right, thank you all for joining in on our panel to talk about right whale stewardship. You probably know Cape Cod Bay. Right whales come here every winter and spring. Up to about 2/3 of the species population comes here basically to feed. So we're really lucky. This is a really important habitat. We're really lucky to live right here and be around this environment. And all of these people have spent a lot of time in this space with the animals or on the water in this environment. And so it's a pretty cool experience to talk to them about their perspectives on stewardship. The right whale, the North Atlantic right whale, critically endangered species. There's only about 30, or 30, no, there's 380 individuals left. So they are a critical conservation topic, and so that's why we're focusing on stewardship around them. So to introduce our panel, I'll start on the end there with Stormy Mayo. Dr. Charles Stormy Mayo. Stormy co-founded the Center for Coastal Studies in 1976. He has led the right whale ecology program for decades. His work has been central to advancing the study and protection of North Atlantic right whales and to establishing Cape Cod Bay as a critical seasonal habitat. He also helped develop the marine animal entanglement response program, and is now a leader in whale rescue efforts. His career reflects a lifetime commitment to marine science and conservation. Now, because we're on Cape Cod and it's the beginning of summer, I'm also going to do a little icebreaker with our panelists. So, Stormy, real quick, favorite ice cream shop? Real quick.
I don't know the name of it. It's somewhere in Eastham.
All right.
So, but I did want to. What is it?
Nauset.
Nauset. But I did want to say that you worked for me, and now you're introducing me.
Full circle.
By golly.
All right, so we'll move on next to Stormy to Annie Bartlett. Annie is a research assistant with CCS's Right Whale Ecology program. She's a key member of the aerial survey team. Her work focuses on documenting right whale abundance, distribution, and health through aerial imagery and field data collection. She also supports data processing and analysis that informs real-time management decisions critical to the conservation of this species. Prior to joining CCS, she worked with multiple right whale survey teams and conducted vessel-based research on humpback whales in Alaska. Annie, favorite ice cream shop?
I'm a fan of the Nut House here in P-Town.
Well, the crowd agrees. All right, our next panelist, Mike Lane. Mike is a commercial lobsterman out of Cohasset, Mass. Mike Lane, he's been fishing since he was 15. He was an early adopter of reduced breaking strength rope, and for the past 5 years has used ropeless gear. His work reflects ongoing changes in fishing practices to reduce risk to North Atlantic right whales. Mike. Favorite ice cream parlor.
If you're ever up in NOAA, Mass, go check out Ponster Farms. You won't be disappointed.
All right. Little off-Cape suggestion there. Like it. Okay, and last but not least, we have Brigid McKenna on the end here. Brigid is at NOAA's Northeast Fisheries Science Center, where she's a fish biologist in the whale ecology branch. She studies North Atlantic right whales through aerial survey data, and her work helps improve understanding of whale distribution, ecology, and life histories to support conservation efforts. Before joining NOAA, she spent nearly a decade with CCS's Right Whale Ecology program as an aerial observer and data manager. She holds degrees from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. Brigid, favorite ice cream parlor?
I live in Eastham, so I'm pretty lucky, I guess. I'm fortunate, but I really like Ice Cream Cafe in Orleans. It just opened. Yeah, see, everyone agrees. Red Velvet is the best flavor.
All right, thanks for indulging on that universal unifier, which is ice cream. So now let's talk about stewardship. So, mine? Well, I live on the Upper Cape. I live in Falmouth. So I'll give you Somerset and Bourne. Check it out. Yeah, thanks, Anne-Marie. Okay, so what we're all here for, perspectives on stewardship that relate to conservation of a critically endangered right whale that lives here in our backyard. So I'm going to open this up to you all on the panel. But how has your understanding or experience of stewardship changed over the course of your career? And we have a pretty diverse panel here in terms of both perspectives from jobs, but also through different people are at different stages of their career. So I think we'll start with Stormy here.
Yeah, I wanted to just put this institution in context, and really, actually, you've all had a little bit of involvement with it, and that is that when we first went up to sea, there were no right whales here. As we left the dock, the word in the wintertime, that January, which was, I think, the January of 75, there were no right whales here. And we didn't see any. And it was the period when this institution, now with really some of you aboard the aircraft, has demonstrated that there are lots of right whales here now. What changed? And what changed was that this institution back in 1985 got a gift from a philanthropist, Steve Helminski, who was a big part of our starting. And he said, you think there are right whales here and you haven't seen any, I'm going to give you a boat. And it was a nice little lobster boat from Maine, Jarvis Newman, and we went to sea. And lo and behold, on the 30th of January in 85, when we went to the right places, we found right whales. That was midwinter. Bill Watkins and Bill Cheville, who were the really knowledgeable scientists at Woods Hole Oceanographic, were stunned. There were not supposed to be right whales here. And the answer is simple. If you go to the wrong places and look for something special, you won't find it. And if you don't look, as people don't do, I certainly didn't in the wintertime, you won't find them. It turns out probably they were here all along. So the Division of Marine Fisheries, NOAA, and other organizations now are looking at this embayment in a very different way than before. And all of you in here, through them, have assumed stewardship. And it's largely because science, our laboratory, NOAA, New England Aquarium, all have recognized that right whales are here in the midwinter and some of the greatest concentrations known in the Atlantic Basin. So just a word that stewardship does not come if we do not deal in a scientific way, whether it's climate change, physics, whether it's medicine. If we do not do the science, we do not have the answers. And that's a very important lesson that I've learned, because when I started, there were no right whales in Cape Cod Bay, just because we didn't look.
Excellent answer, Stormy.
Thank you.
My career, of course, has been much shorter than Stormy's so far. Hopefully, it can be as long as yours has been. But for me, I think I'm still very early career, starting out. I didn't really have a great sense. Stewardship for me was much more of, what decisions or actions can I take in my personal life to make me feel better about the life that I'm living. And as I've worked in the positions I've been able to work in and continue to work here at the Center for Coastal Studies, I've really gained an appreciation for Collaboration, as stewardship is collaboration, because especially with critically endangered species like the right whale, if groups like all the ones that Stormy mentioned aren't working together, sharing knowledge, sharing resources where possible, progress isn't going to be made as quickly as it needs to be when the future of these individuals is, as up in the air as it is. So collaboration, working with different organizations, the North Atlantic Right Whale Consortium really brings all the researchers, stakeholders together and being able to be a part of that and witness that has been really powerful over the last couple of years for me.
So I guess if you went back to the 90s when I first got started in lobstering, when I first got out of high school and went lobstering, and told me I was going to end up here, I never would have believed it. I went from not even knowing what a right whale looked like or anything about a right whale to now, doing on-demand gear, trying to figure out a way to, to save my job at the same time and help the whales. Been quite an experience, honestly. Fishermen are stewards of the ocean. We're out there more than anybody. We see what's going on in the ocean. We're the first ones to recognize, anything changing. And just to be a part of this, and I remember telling my kids when they're younger, when they went out in the world, I said, you got to be accountable for your actions, right? Like, you represent me when you go out in the world and how we raise you. So I always kind of took that to, teaching them, and said, well, I got to, kind of put my, my occupation where, I don't know how to explain it, but that's kind of what drove me to getting into all this and try to figure out how to do the right thing, to reduce break-in strength to the on-demand gear that we're fishing now. So it's been quite an experience.
This event gave me a nice opportunity to reflect on what I considered stewardship and how that has evolved. So it's been nice for me. And in a broader sense, it made me think about how, kind of similar to yoga practice, which I'm not a yogi, like Leah practices yoga much more than I do, but a common teacher mantra is, it's a practice, so you just meet yourself where you're at. It's not going to be perfect. And so I think stewardship, a lot of people in society today, for all facets of life, will want to, be perfect or be the most knowledgeable or have imposter syndrome, which we spoke about before the panel. I think all or nothing. Like if I'm not giving 100%, then it's not worth it. But I think stewardship, a lot of small actions can be powerful, and it can change day to day on what you're capable of doing, and all of it's important. So it just looks different for everybody depending on where you're at.
All right, thanks for engaging on that. It kind of sets the stage for some of our next questions, which are trying to get into, some more personal experiences. So are there any moments in your work that were particularly meaningful or like a pivot point for you that highlighted some aspect of stewardship?
This is casual. I think for me, I'm so grateful for the work that I get to do and all of the things that I get to witness. So there are so many stories, truly so many. I think one that really stands out and that we, often talk about amongst the team and reference and come back to is last year we were flying an aerial survey, April 17th, 2025, and there were a big pile of right whales in the southwest corner of Cape Cod Bay feeding. It was our second track line of the day, so it was still very early. Every year we're, memorizing the moms that have been seen down in the southeast so that we can, recognize them as we see them in the field. If, vessel teams need to go over and get vessel photos, we want to be able to give them the real-time location. And so I start photographing this mom-calf pair, which is always exciting to see. And then I'm looking at the photos, and I'm like, I feel pretty confident I know, who all of the moms are, and I don't recognize this one. And thankfully, I was in the plane with Ryan, who we were also talking about before the panel, is an expert field IDer. So not only did he confirm that it was not a known mom that year, but he was able to identify it, who it was. It was Monarch, and she had not been documented with a calf in the calving grounds in the southeast U.S. So being able to find who knows where her calf was born, whether it was down in the southeast and it just went undocumented, or if it was some other place and they ended up in Cape Cod Bay. That was a really special moment to add another, every year the number of calves that we see is an important source of joy and inspiration for people monitoring the population. It's the easiest thing that we can point to when people ask about what's going on with the population. And so to be able to add another number to the calf count that year was pretty remarkable. That was pretty remarkable. I'll stop there for now.
Wow, we just witnessed a
guess,
very unusual thing.
I mean, at least yours was a pleasant thought. Mine's kind of. So one of the first things I ever did is with me and Bobby's partner Lori. We went down and listened to Michael Moore speak down at Barnstable one night, and I was angry and insulted because he compared fishermen to we were worse than whalers because of the entanglement problem, and I remember listening to him talk, and I was insulted that someone would compare me to a whaler back in the 1700s, and I'm like, wow, that's definitely not who I am. And I remember talking to him and listening to and trying to explain my side. It was like, it was insulting, but he didn't mean it that way. But then as we got into this, and you see the pictures. We've all seen the pictures of the entanglements and how horrific they are, and those really got to me. And thinking like, I don't want to be known as that person that's out there entangling these whales. It's definitely not my intention. And all this stuff, just witnessing it, has really made me look at my industry and try to help my industry figure another way of catching lobsters without harming whales. Like, we really have to do a little more and be the stewards of the ocean that we all claim that we are. So.
That's great.
I have two, and I guess that's two sides of a coin, but it's one is a beautiful one, similar to what Annie mentioned, and it was finding a new mom calf for the year. It was April 12th, 2017. I was photo. We were flying on the backside. Some people here will remember this, but same thing happened. We photographed. I didn't recognize the mom. It was really exciting in the plane, and we sent the pictures to some of the people on the ground who could ID it, and it was this whale numbered 1412 Iceland. And she had been seen prior 13 years ago before. So we resurrected her and found the new calf, which was really incredible. She just has a really unique sightings history that's cryptic. And so it was just a cool personal experience, but also gives you hope that, they're going elsewhere, they're mating successfully. And we still see that calf, or now that's a juvenile today. The other one that really has stuck with me was in the summer of 2020 or 2021. But there was a report of a dead calf off of New York, and we were in the area, so we got redirected to document it. And it ended up having been struck by two different vessels. And one of the first one had survived for weeks because they could detect the healing, and then the second strike is what killed it. And so it just really highlights the importance of the research, the monitoring, being able to ID the individuals and track where they're going. It's all part of the story, and really just keeps everything, at the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, I have a couple of extreme memories. When you deal with right whales, as all of us do, nearly every involvement is extreme because right whales are such odd creatures. At least that's my impression. They're very odd. They don't do things. It's hard to deal with them as humans and come up with a reasonable explanation for what they're doing because, at least in my experience, they don't. They make those of us who think we know what's going on look particularly bad. That's typical of science, but it's even more so, I think, of right whales. But I have two experiences. One was an effort to rescue a big animal. I think it may have been 2030. Do either of you know that number? That was a long time ago, and we flew up to Canada because the whale had tracking device on it that the center uses in their disentanglement efforts. And I was at the time working with Dave Mattila to develop the methods to rescue whales, and we'd done a lot of it. And the whale had dragged gear across thousands of miles, apparently. The tracking device, of course, gave us an idea of where it was. And at the end of it all, for me, the whale was up somewhere in the Bay of Fundy, and airplanes over us and boats and working like crazy. And she had a wrap around her body that had cut deeply in. And the only solution that I could come up with was to put pressure on her, and that means try to keep her at the surface so we can try to cut the line. The line was so deeply embedded in a circle right around the midriff of her body, and she was obviously in tough shape, and you would have thought impossible to deal with. And in the end, we put sea anchors on her, big enough to stop big vessels in a sea. And the more we put on her, the more she stayed on the surface, but the harder she pushed with that powerful tail. And at the end, she was bleeding around the entire line around the middle of her body, much like Michael would have talked about this really a terrible situation. New England Aquarium people who love these animals as much as we do said, you can't put her under this pressure anymore. And I said, there's no other choice. We've got to stop her. We can't keep doing this. And at the end, darkness came in. We took the weights off her. And then I think a couple of weeks later, the tracking device was seen off New Jersey, and she was photographed really at the end of her life off of New Jersey, and she sunk into the deep ocean at some point there. And the other one that I won't go on about, but was remarkable, was a whale that was struck somewhere, I believe, in Cape Cod Bay, a big female, and one of you must know who that whale was. Was that... Braid? No, it wasn't Braid. Do you know what it was? More information. Yeah. She was the biggest female we've had, and she was dead. And I went out to tow her back into the dock, actually into the beach in Wellfleet. And the remarkable thing was to get the rope around her. I had to get out on her and walk on her, and she was just as stable as a pier. Dead, struck by a ship, and lost, a female lost, Lord knows how many calves she would have had, but she didn't. An old friend, and the business of walking around on her body, like at a pier, the waves breaking over her, and there I am with her. A very difficult scene, both of which, and I'm sorry those are such downers, but they are the truth of right whales, and it's why all of us do the work.
All of these stories really segue into the next question, but given the challenging work emotionally around a lot of this, but also the changing regulatory climate that is quite challenging, what is motivating all of you to keep going?
I feel again, reflecting quite a bit on, because it can be such a challenging job. Like, you have your highs and lows, like we all spoke about, but I do think my involvement gives the species a better chance. And that might sound like I'm bragging, but I'm not. I do think the work that we are all doing those steps will help them more so than if they weren't happening. And so that helps me a lot, especially with these challenging sightings or circumstances, especially the entanglements or deaths. It just helps me bring me back to center.
I guess mine's going to be more, like we talked earlier, mine's going to be selfish. I have to go to work. That's my motto, and it always has been. Granted, what we're doing, is helping the right whale at the same time, but I have to figure out a way how to keep feeding my family. So when I got into this was just really solely about myself and my industry, and how do we keep moving forward, because in my world, like when I can't fish, I'm not a fisherman, therefore what am I? And I don't know how many people in this room could take 5 months off and not work and survive with their jobs, but I'm not one of those. So we just kind of, that's really why I do it. That's honestly, I know it is a selfish reason, but that's why I do it. So.
Well, I think part of my reason is also selfish because, again, with there are highs and lows for sure. And at the same time, I do get to witness, pretty incredible things that not many other people will get to witness. And kind of building off what Brigid said, again, I don't have I'm still early career, but I have had research experiences prior to joining the right whale world. And in those, I struggled a bit more with feeling like, I'm doing this research and I know the benefit long term will, be it's good to collect data and publish a paper, and eventually maybe some decision will be made about this. Whereas with right whales, I very much feel like the work that I do day to day, just like Brigid said, has much more of an immediate impact, whether our sightings trigger management areas or, influence regulatory actions. There's just, and again, that's also partially selfish because I want the instant gratification of, feeling like I'm doing something in the moment to help rather than waiting for the long-term payout of a more involved process, which is part of it too. But anyway, I think, being able to feel like I am making a difference and also being able to be in the field doing the work is what gives me motivation.
Well, I'm retired. Actually, I'm still working with the center and working on a paper, but the principal reason I'm retired is that the Center for Coastal Studies had a chance to grab a really exceptional scientist to take over the right whale program. Better scientist than I am, Daniel Palacios. I think he's at an IWC meeting right now, International Whaling Commission. So I still have a great interest, and I still end up sitting on panels and things like that. I'm now actually spending a fair amount of time when not working on my science. I'm trying to raise funds to keep the place going, because this is a time when the science that I've mentioned is under an amazing and embarrassing pressure in this country. And hence, institutions like this, obviously you all have an interest, I'm not asking you for bucks, but I am saying support the science. And that's the reason that you've heard from all these people that they have done the work. It's because without that, there are no whales, as I thought there were none until we had science.
I thought maybe Annie had a rebuttal for that. I was very interested in what that would be. Well, that's a good segue into the last formal question from my side, which is, looking at the community here, the community around the Cape, the community around the Atlantic. How can they be a part of stewardship for right whales and stewardship of the environment?
I can start off. I think telling stories, really, wherever you are, whatever industry you're in, whatever your experience is, telling stories, sharing what you know. You'd be surprised, a lot of people that I interact with that don't even know that right whales exist. And so, how can people be invested in saving something when they don't even know it exists? And in their own backyards, where you can, walk to the beach and see right whales skim feeding, 100 meters off the beach. And it's everyday people can have connections with right whales. Fishermen can have connections with right whales in the industry. Researchers can, and sharing those stories, I think, is the best way to get people invested in taking collective action, showing that people are going to show up and care.
My community, I guess my community would be all the fishermen in the Northeast, which most of them really don't care for what the stuff that I'm doing. So there's been a lot of pushback on us guys that have been trying to solve this problem. The best thing that I can do and my peers, I guess, is we got to communicate more with them and try to get them to understand what we've been doing. And I wish they'd open their eyes a little more. I'm disappointed with a lot of guys, just because there's so many naysayers, there's so much bad vibes going on with what we're doing. And what I'm learning is, a majority of the guys really are guys that aren't closed down right now to lobster fishing, that are still making a living. A lot of those guys are pushing back hard on us right now for what we're doing. But we just go out and we talk to them one-on-one, and we try to explain to them what we're doing, why we're doing, So hopefully if they are in our shoes someday, instead of going through all this work that we've been doing and having to figure it out, they'll be able to just step right in and go with really none of the headaches that I've had to put up with. So that's kind of how I look at it.
I think it's good to keep in mind that everyone's, actions or decisions can help affect right whales in a positive light. So whether it's through communication, through social media, actively engaging in local, federal, state elections, I think there's power to all those components, and just trying to be engaged in one or all of those things really help with stewardship in your personal day-to-day lives or just within your community.
I just want to add on to that and bring it back to how you started with, it's a practice and it's not giving 100% all the time, especially in this day and age when it feels like there's a lot of giving and you're not necessarily meeting whatever standards you have set for yourself. So the small things do matter and do add up and are important.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about the small things, not the small things that we just heard there, and that's really important. But when we're talking about the story of right whales, and it's compelling, of course, we need to keep in mind, and it is part of the science, that when we talk of right whale conservation, we should remember that to protect these animals, we need to conserve the ecosystem. The clams are suffering terribly from maybe not entanglement, but from certainly other impacts. And so as you tell those stories that I think rightly are part of the way you get out to get the word out, the word should not be just related to an individual species. In our case, of course, that's what we're dedicated to. But there's a whole system that is under tremendous stress. And don't think that doesn't include us. The right whales are in a sense, very large birds in a dark cave, and they're telling us something. It's the canary in the coal mine. So keep in mind that science needs to understand it, and we all need to respond with management and protection of the system as a whole, and indeed maybe deal with these individual issues. They are critical, of course, but they are not the only issues. It's a whole network of problems that we should preserve the system for the future.
Great. Thank you all for those questions. I do have some questions that were submitted preemptively, and so I might ask one of those right now, but also we're opening it up to you all if you have questions that you would like to ask this panel. So think on that while I ask this question. And I thought this was a really good opportunity for Mike to tell us more about the changing landscape of lobster industry. So this person asks, are there any ideas how to track lobsters caught via ropeless gear when they go to market so consumers can choose them?
Oh, yeah, we've been trying to get over that hurdle. That's almost impossible with the way the markets are set up. Lobsters go to dealers. They can either be shipped off to restaurants, processing plants. Lobsters get handled 4 or 5 times before they reach the actual marketplace. So I know, we tried doing lobster bans in Massachusetts to kind of identify whale-safe lobsters. We're working right now trying to, I think it's Disney was one of the big buyers. They've been trying to, Disney? I thought someone said who, so whatever. So we've been kind of working with them trying to figure out how to do it, but it's next to impossible. I mean, there's so many lobsters coming in from Virginia to Canada that, my dealer, he buys off, just me right now, and then he goes to Maine to buy lobsters. It's almost impossible. And I know we were talking about Disney. I said the best thing that they could actually, if Disney wanted to buy lobsters and pay a higher price, the way they would have to go about it is Massachusetts on its own, whether you fish with ropeless gear or you go home with, the fishermen in Massachusetts are doing more, they're doing above and beyond anybody else on the East Coast. Because we're experimenting with ropeless gear, we invented reduced break-in strength, and the guys who don't want to participate bring all their gear home. So we are because we have a closure, yes. Well, it's because we have a closure. But no other parts of the industry are doing as much as Massachusetts is. So the one thing I said to Disney is that you could buy lobsters just from Massachusetts. I mean, because even the guys that aren't participating in the ropeless program are still doing their part. All their gear's in their backyard. They're waiting for the state to tell them they can go back fishing. So that was one way we kind of look at it.
Yeah, and just to add some more details to that, the Massachusetts restricted area is closed from February 1st to April 30th, which is federal waters offshore here. The part of that space that overlaps with state waters is closed during that same period, but it's dynamically opened. So the state dynamically opens that portion of state waters in response to detected whale presence, which is part of Annie's job and Brigid's job and my job. So that's what Mike is alluding to, that there's this period where the commercial fishery cannot operate in that space. And there's a vessel speed restriction. That was also a question here. In Cape Cod Bay, we have a state mandated vessel speed restriction for all size vessels, 10 knots between March 1st and April 30th. And then there's different federal schemes for larger ships to slow down to 10 knots. Does anyone want to add anything before we on that topic? Oh, we've got a question here.
I searched all over when I heard that hunting for lobsters and people doing ropeless. I went all over trying to find where those lobsters were going. And when I found out where they were going, and I was told that they're just all mixed together, I mean, I was flabbergasted because
It's a big market.
yeah, but there are people out here who would pay more for people fishing with the ropeless technology. And it's a loss of market for
There's not
the
a
lobstermen, for the wholesaler, for the stores.
Yeah, there's a few guys going, but there's really not a lot, guy. I mean, I think my harbor has 4 guys going right now. But all in all, I think we're up to like 20, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot, and it's not a lot of product being brought in right now. And it's just, yeah, it's a tough market. I mean, most of our lobsters go overseas. Most of our lobsters, believe it or not, get shipped to Canada to be processed. That's one of the United States' problems. We have no processing facilities. So all our lobsters go to Canada, get processed in Canada, and get shipped back to America. And that's one of the biggest hurdles that we face is why do, and it drives us crazy that we don't have processing plants in the United States, but we don't.
This is a related question. Are there any economic incentives to use ropeless gear?
Yeah,
Let me just repeat.
my mortgage payment.
Let me repeat your question for everybody. Is there any economic incentives for the fishing industry to use lobster gear or to use on-demand gear?
No, I mean,
So does it cost you more?
well, so the way we designed it, correct? So we have a gear lending library, which is run through the Northeast Science Center. So the way we had it in our minds was this gear is so expensive, like for me to afford to go and buy it would be a big business decision, which I don't know if I'd opt in or opt out. I probably would, but anyways. So the gear is in the Science Center, who then has the EFP, which is the Experimental Fisheries Permit, for me to go in the closed area. You can get the gear from them. They teach you how to use it. You got to do X amount of deployments to be certified to use it. Then the gear is given to the fishermen to use during the closure. When the closure is over and the buoys go back on, the gear can then be returned to the Science Center so they can service it. And ultimately, we thought the gear would be able to follow the whales up and down the coast to be used by any fishery that is affected by a right whale closure. Is how we saw it. So that's how we had it planned in our we're all learning as we go. This is something so new to this industry that getting the grasp on it's very hard. So that's kind of how we avoided the costs of this program. So it doesn't cost the fishermen anything but time to learn how to use it.
And where do those funds come from to buy that equipment?
Excuse me, I didn't hear the first.
Where do the funds come
Where do the funds come from?
Well, I mean, we just had $58 million appropriated in the last spending bill in the Biden administration for right whales. That was $58 million. I don't know, I think they pissed through that because I got a $400 unit that needs to be repaired and no one can find the money for it. But what do I know? I'm just a fisherman. So the money has been donated by IFAW. Also, all sorts of groups have donated gear. The state has money to buy gear. I'm in a grant program for the state, which I haven't bought gear yet, but I can through them. So a lot of it's been donated in just federal funds. The gear is expensive. It's anywhere between $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 per unit. So
Compared to?
My buoys are getting expensive. They're like $10 a piece now. So it's expensive, but it's also new. It's something that's a new. We always go to your TV. Your first flat screen TV was $5,000. Now you can buy it for $200 at Walmart. Will the price come down? I'm sure eventually we can get it come down.
Is it hard to use and does it work?
It's not. Oh my God, these guys. Yeah, no. It's so funny because I was just thinking about this the other day. Is it hard to use? And, 90% of the idiots in the ocean right now that fish wouldn't know how to fish without the equipment they were actually using with ropeless, right? Everybody needs a chart plot that shows every little piece of rock on the bottom of the ocean. Now, when I first started out, you need to know land ranges and how to read a depth finder when I first went with my father. We didn't have all this fancy electronic stuff. Everybody now in their boats has computers and chart plotters that tells them everything that used to take the old timers 20 years to learn. We're using the same technology, we just got to combine it in a different, which it drives me nuts because the pushback from my industry is so severe, and I'm like, we're using the same technology that we already have, we're just repackaging it, ultimately. I mean, we have cars that park themselves, but these guys can't get over the fact that we have a buoy that just pops up from the bottom of the ocean. Does it work? Now, me and Stormy just had this conversation. If you asked me this last year, I said I had 98% success rate. It worked good. This year, it's been a disaster. I went out the other day, it takes me 20 or 30 tries to get one unit to pop up, and it's just because the stage we're in, we're using Bluetooth technology on a tablet to talk to transducers, and it's not, something's gone haywire, and we're working on it. I called Rob Morris from EdgeTech, and we're like, this didn't work today, we're working on it every day, trying to figure out what my problem is. But last year, it would work great. Now, how long do we want to talk about rope? I don't want to take up everything. So now the next question is going to be, why don't you do it year round, right? This is where this is where you lose the fishermen, because they don't want to do this year round. And I understand that. I have a daughter that fishes out of a skiff. She fishes single traps. You can't expect someone in an 18-foot skiff to go ropeless fishing, right? Guys in Maine fish completely different than the guys in Massachusetts. They fish single traps up inside, small boats, big boats, and then they fish trawls like we do down here. So you can't compare Maine to Massachusetts to Rhode Island, which everybody wants to blanket this ropeless as every year, everywhere. That's what the fishermen will say that. Like, we did this, and they'll mandate it all the time. Which then brings me back to common sense has to come back into the equation where, like Massachusetts, we shut down when the whales are there. We did our part. We have reduced breaking strength. So if we do have an entanglement the rest of the year, hopefully it'll break loose. So, the way I think the only way it's going to work is in closed areas when the whales are there. It's not going to work on a full-time scale. One problem is, in the fall, we get the severe storms where we have had times where we've lost everything. And back in 92 and 93, we lost everything. All the gear was gone. And if you had ropeless on all these units, it would be a complete disaster. Because the only way you get it back is because the buoys are all balled up and you can pull on something. And so that's another downfall of ropeless. And then there is the safety issue that everybody's concerned about right now, which we understand that. So, and I tell the state all the time, I say this to Dan all the time, keep this as a small-scale fishery in Massachusetts, right? We can fish 15 units through the course of the closure. Teach the guys that they don't need a tremendous amount of gear to make money. It's enough to have a day's pay, keeps the bills paid, keeps everybody off my back, and keeps us going. And then teach the guys, listen, we don't need 800 lobster traps to catch a lobster. We only need, we can get by with this for now. So that's how I always look at it, is on a small scale for when the whales are in the closed, and like Mass Bay, like we have a lot of whales, so it's understandable to me.
And
Okay.
yeah. Thanks for that, Mike. You're shouldering the whole industry tonight. Another question. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is really great. So what Stormy was saying and what people are thinking about, which is, green technology. And so we had, these original plans for all the offshore wind, windmills offshore, the turbines. And so my question is, do we have any information at all anywhere around the world with any kind of whale about whether the cables underneath, on the seashore floor, or the noise from these turbines or even the, I don't know, electromagnetic, whatever, that's impacting the whales at all?
Yeah, so the question is relative to the construction and the implementation of offshore wind energy development and operation, and how that any part of that, whether it's construction, the cables, the windmills themselves, would affect whales. Does anyone want to take that one? Mike? No, just kidding.
I know I don't like the cooling stations that they use. They have cooling stations under the water, on the bottom of the ocean, that cools the cables, which increases the bottom temperature to like about 90 degrees. So you're going from 40 to 90 degrees. I'm not a big windmill proponent. I think they're the worst things that ever happen in the ocean. Put them up. Everybody should have a windmill in the house. I got no problem with that. I have solar panels. Why can't I put a windmill up? They don't belong in the ocean. That's my thought.
Yeah, I think anytime you do anything commercial in the ocean, it's going to have impacts on the things that are living there. What those impacts are, it's hard to say at this point. It's anytime you commercialize something in the ocean, there are going to be impacts. I think about it more in terms of do the positive impacts of renewable energy outweigh the potential negative impacts of commercializing, building these structures in the ocean?
Your turn.
Can I just hand it around here? I've got a couple of views. One is I have for years, for now many decades, opposed industrialization of the ocean. And that I'd like to see a cap on how much we, as a species, do things to this ocean, and very much in response to what you're saying, because indeed, you can't say that anything that we do is having no effect. It may not be a significant effect, and who knows about that. There has been a very powerful lobby that came, in fact, it's peopled mostly by some of the older PhDs who were supporters of cigarettes years ago, who are using the same arguments, slightly retooled relative to offshore wind. And a group of us, I'm one of the signatories, a bunch of scientists who headed up projects on right whales, wrote a letter which had no impact whatsoever on the argument, basically to the point that there was not a very substantial indication that whales were dying because of offshore wind. And some of you may well have seen some of the publicity which was drawn up on that subject. The one thing that I think is important is the point that Annie makes, which is that you can't do things in the ocean and expect no reaction of the system. And if the scale of the industry, which in the case of wind energy is huge, if that scale is big, you got to be vigilant because there may be a reaction within the system. That said, all of the whale deaths that you've perhaps heard about in the news that were ascribed by some of the cigarette guys to fathometers, to construction and whatever, there is no scientific evidence that that is the case. Those whales appear not to have been injured by that. And so the last part of that story is, I don't trust anything that we do within a system that is large scale so well that I don't think we should monitor with vigilance. So I very much support wind energy because of the coming problem we've got with climate change that will arguably have an immense impact on right whales, but also on the clams, incidentally. We should take our understanding of these things back to a lot of the early development. When oil was discovered, it was one of the great finds of all history, harnessing the power of oil, and we've all benefited from it. It could, I'm sure it won't, but it could spell the end of an Earth system, of the ecosystem now, and that's because we were never able to be vigilant at the level that we should be. And that may be happening with wind energy, but there's no indication. I worry that removing that much energy from the Earth's atmosphere, which is what a propeller does, may ultimately have an impact, and we just don't know about it. It may be the oil of yesteryear. And now there's this thing happening, and maybe at some point in the future we will discover that withdrawing that much energy from the atmosphere is actually having profound impacts. We just don't know. And that's, again, where science comes in, and the science that these people do in airplanes and whatever, that is critical, and it relates to things like wind energy.
Well, I got some science for you. So, talk about electromagnetic currents. So, in lobster traps, as they get old, they're made of steel, stainless, and aluminum. And if anybody knows anything about the ocean and electrolysis, when you have different metals, right, you have different metals, it reacts and it creates either electrical current or it causes some type of reaction. Now, any fisherman will tell you that an old lobster trap, once it starts rusting out, does not compare to a brand new lobster trap. And we always claimed it's because the metals acting within each other are creating like an electric current that the lobsters don't like. So if that's true, and that's on a small scale of a lobster trap, what would a underwater power cable do?
Yeah.
No, but I'm not a scientist. Science is, my science teacher told me science is nothing but an educated guess. That was one of the only things I remember from science class.
Hey, it's an educated guess that we toil over for years and years and years. Brigid?
No comment.
Okay.
No,
Excellent to hear from you.
I think there are processes that are in place whenever these sort of projects are occurring. So there's environmental impacts, studies that are happening before, during, and after the construction. That's at least to my knowledge, I'm not an expert in this at all, but especially for large whales, like we had the New England Aquarium that was contracted by BOEM back in the 2010s, just to be able to know kind of what the ecosystem looked like before, during, and after, and see if you could tell of any effects. So that there is research going on to help inform any sort of effects to that. I can't speak to the fisheries component, but it is regulated.
Shouldn't the research been done before they went in?
It does happen before, but before, during, and after.
And we'll do the research as it goes. Like,
yeah.
If it does have a negative effect, it's going to be too late.
Yep, they try to do it before. I don't know how much time they give.
The fact is that we do have quite a few whale strandings ever since these things started being built. I mean, we can't deny that fact. We've all seen it. We've seen it on social media.
But then there's
saying.
Yeah, but then there's a question as to whether we have been keeping track of those things. In the old days, whales came up and people didn't pay attention. We had one on our beach when I was a kid, and nobody knew about it in Truro. So, I mean,
was a sea monster in Scituate.
Well, I mean, right whales were sea monsters to my grandfather. He saw them repeatedly in the Herring Cove. What was he looking at? Right whales. So I think that the local knowledge, which you give us, the knowledge of what goes on in the fishery is critical to getting around some of these corners. And for us not to pay attention to that is really to do so at our peril. It's critical for us to take all of the information, the basic information that old-timers and young-timers have, and stick it together and subject it to science. The problem with a lot of the stuff that's happened with wind energy is yes, there was work done before, but the scale of change is so great that it wasn't done, in my judgment, early enough. And then the funding for the other side of it, which is it's a before and after study. It's what we all do in our lives. That's what needs to be done to answer some of these questions. That's what science is guesswork, sure, but it is sort of a lot of before and after stuff. What was it? What is it? What sense does it make? The problem is that the befores and afters are not always supported by the only people who can handle it, which is the U.S. government, because the scale is so big. So I'm afraid that we should know what's happening with offshore wind. I don't know that we're ever going to grasp it. I hope we grasp it soon enough so that we can, if need be, make changes. I don't know whether that's going to happen.
So this is similar to a question that was submitted earlier, because this is a concurrent observation that's occurring as well, is some changing climatic impacts to the habitat from warming waters, et cetera. Does anyone want to comment on how that has affected the ecosystem as well as the food chain that right whales, not only right whales, because right whales are eating zooplankton, copepods, microscopic little bugs, that are the foundation of much of the food chain out in the Gulf of Maine. So does anyone want to discuss some of those observations or some of those impacts that we're seeing at the same time as these other activities?
Oh, I thought you wanted to say.
I guess to sum it up, how is it affecting the food chain in the ways that you've observed that are relevant to your work?
So I know, just speaking on this year, and I think we touched on this earlier, was this year was some of the coldest ocean water I think I've ever seen in my life. 50 years old, so I've been around the ocean my whole, I don't remember this cold water unless you go back to the 80s. So it's going to be interesting to see what the whales do, and I think that was my question. Are there copepods right now? Where are the whales? Because we were told when we first started this that the whales leave April vacation. It's like clockwork every year. Well, now the whales seem to be staying later and later. I mean, the first year of our closure, we were closed until the 20th of May because the whales didn't want to leave. Why is that? Is it because the copepods? There's got to be reasons. But the climate, the ocean's always changing. I mean, if you're a lobsterman, you know that. You catch lobsters one year one time, one year the next. There is no rhyme or reason to the ocean. Never has been. You have to be able to adapt, move, change your fishing practices. But I think this year is going to be interesting to see. My big question is, when are the whales going to leave? Are they going to leave? Have they not showed up yet in numbers? I think we had 30 in the bay, which really isn't a lot for this time of year. We should be in the 90 range. Right. My biggest fear, I guess, or I guess not mine, because I can go ropeless fishing, but would be, if these things stick around till the end of May and state waters won't open up, there's going to be a lot of guys that start to get nervous. So.
Yeah, just from a right whale population perspective and distribution, there was a documented regime shift starting in the 2010s where they started going to different habitats where there might not be protections in place. So they started abandoning Bay of Fundy, which was one of their critical habitats they showed up at kind of en masse every summer and fall, and started going to the Gulf of St. Lawrence where there weren't protections. It's very industrial with fishing and ship traffic. And so that kind of kicked off, or at least was in part, the unusual mortality event that we're seeing. And there were a lot of deaths. Leah, I think you flew up there and saw some of the carcasses. So they follow the food. And so it's really this kind of, it's amazing work that the Center for Coastal Studies does and other research groups trying to figure out how you can predict or forecast where those plankton blooms are going to be and how that's going to affect the right whale's distribution and presence, because that's kind of the whole thing, right? Is like you need to know where they are, which is what Stormy was saying, in order to have protections in place.
At the same time, we had the shift from the Bay of Fundy to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, was the
I
same.
will push back
correct?
on that because it's not the same animals that went to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. It's not actually. Yes, there's more
Was
seen
it
in the
a
Gulf of
different
St.
North Atlantic right whale than?
No, it's just the proportion of animals that are in the Gulf of St. Lawrence are a particular portion of the species, and they weren't necessarily just relocating.
But
So-
they don't go to the Bay of Fundy anymore. They're
Right, but those aren't necessarily like, oh, those 130 moved from the Bay of Fundy to the
Okay,
Great. So
but-
they're actually somewhere else that we don't know where
But
they
the
are.
feeding
regime
changed
yeah.
to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and at the same time frame is when we had the decline in birth rates. Which the decline in birth rates, when I was in the Take Reduction meetings, was all due to entanglement, which I know I'm biased, but no one brought up the fact that the feeding patterns changed at the same time that the birth rates dipped. And now we're back to high birth rates now that they found where their food was. Maybe they got back onto a more nutrient-based diet, and then just science, right?
Yes, and concurrently faced a lot of the pressures, the anthropogenic pressures up there. So there's
Yeah, that's
But
when
I'll-
we had the major entanglements.
in the UME,
Yeah.
yeah. But Stormy, speak on the food part or whatever you want.
Yeah, well, I think we're barely understanding the relationships here. I mean, this institution is the center of a lot of the work on zooplankton, which is what they're eating. Christy Hudak and the team that goes out in a boat is that group is understanding whales at a much more proximate level, right nearby, feeding animals, and we're doing a lot of work on that. And yet, it is one of those things that you hear about science, and it shouldn't put you off from science, but it is that the more we know, the more questions we have about how these animals time their feeding and their seasonal movements across thousands of miles in some cases. Cape Cod Bay, over my view, has gone, for instance, from an area that was primarily a feeding location, and now it's turning out to be, I think, and is not recognized as it should be, as a primary nursery ground for right whales. As some of you probably know, there have been, year by year, every year, a significant number of the calves that are born come to Cape Cod Bay, and they don't do what they do along the whole East Coast, which is travel through and go looking for food elsewhere. They hang out in Cape Cod Bay. Of course, the question people ask is, well, is it because it's such a well-protected area? Do the whales know? And I more and more leave the door open for those amazing possibilities. It's because of the food, though, as far as we can tell, that these animals come and go. Oddly, there has been a drop-off in the number of whales in Cape Cod Bay, and at least the last I talked to Christy, the plankton appears to be pretty good. So we thought we understood that when the plankton decreased, they were gone. Decreased in the Bay of Fundy, they left. That was the hypothesis. Simple hypothesis. Makes a lot of sense. Turns out it's probably much more complicated. And that's why it's exciting work, but that's why we also have to admit that we don't really fully understand it. Yet these animals need our absolute protection. We do know that rope kills animals. We haven't mentioned much, if anything, about ship strikes. I have always believed that ship strikes are those animals that you look down the list of the whales that have died over the last decade. There are a whole bunch of them that are apparently healthy animals, and they're recorded as cause unknown. I think those are ship strikes. So the number of unknowns to deal with these issues is really almost beyond the manager's capacity, except for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which makes Cape Cod Bay the mother lode of right whales, also the best protected habitat probably for any marine mammal in the world.
All right, I've been told that we're at the end of our time, and I think that was a nice celebration of the work everyone does here in Massachusetts to work towards whale conservation. So everyone's going to be hanging around here for a bit, I think, or you can run away if you want, but people are here if you want to talk to them more about your questions. Anne-Marie, are you here because you want to say something? Okay, I'll hand it over to her.
Thank you so much. What an incredible discussion. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment if we haven't already said it, and that is the amazing work that Mark Adams has done, one of our great local artists who has done these pieces on the side. Just a note for Mark, I don't know if he's still here, but he's done a really beautiful job.
Thank you, Stormy. Thanks for saying that. Thanks so much. It's so nice to have representatives from different walks, and I didn't realize it was your 50th anniversary this year, too. Did you say you're 50 this year? Happy anniversary, Mike. Let's celebrate you all year long. You are a great example of working together, moving forward together. We totally appreciate where you're coming from, your livelihood, and so doubly appreciate the risks that you take, the collaboration, the partnership, the care. Thank you so much. Yeah. Matt Delaney is back in the house. So I'd love if he could just say a word about why I'm calling his name.
Well, I'll stand off.
Yeah, come over here and use the mic, please.
Well, we really developed an incredible passion for right whales after a sighting right out here at Race Point Lighthouse in 2004. And it affected us so that we really started studying about right whales and learning how critically it was becoming that they may go away in our lifetime. And I was at New England Aquarium today, their celebration, and so it's been a long day, but it really is amazing to us that this is the 4th annual Right Whale Day. The first one was in 2023, and it's kind of ironic that there are 23 new calves this year. So that is kind of, really cool. And, I made a point of saying today about people like us. We need more people like us on this planet. I mentioned 3 heroes of mine, Teddy Roosevelt, the father of our national parks, and Jacques Cousteau. I was lucky enough to grow up on the South Shore, so I was always at the ocean, and I grew up in Cohasset. And then watching that show really opened our eyes to the undersea world of the ocean and all the great things in it. And I think a lot of us remember those shows. And last but not least, David Attenborough, who just did a film on ocean. If you haven't seen that, it came out about a year ago. And this guy has been an incredible advocate for saving the oceans and the planet. I call him the planet ambassador, or whatever you want to call it. And on May 8th, he's going to be 100. It's incredible that the guy is still at it. I feel old sometimes, and I'm not quite 70. My wife and I cried when Charlie Baker signed it into law, and now it's the 4th one. It's I was so pleased and be able to meet Stormy at the celebration at New England Aquarium 2 years ago, and after hearing so much about him, I finally get to meet him, and he says, "Yeah, we drove up from the Cape this morning, and I heard you on GBH." I said, "What?" I had no idea how I got on there, but he said, "Oh, you were great." I'm like, "What did I say?" thank you for having me. Thank you for all you do here. It's really quite amazing. Something that I think Stormy had something to do with back in the day, right? A little bit. So that's really, I don't want to be long-winded, but thank you for having me. And I think you can tell, I mean, I still get emotional about the whole thing.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you. I think emotion is the key. You can't want to protect what you don't know and don't love, I think as Annie had said earlier. I mean, Mark's artwork is an example of how important that is. Think about your why. Everyone up here said what their why was, and thanks for all of your work and your whys. Why are you here tonight? Why do we do this work? Why are you supporting us? Why are you going to become a member if you are not already a member? We've got brochures right over here. Come see us. And tell somebody else about that. It's contagious. This optimism. We heard, frank looks at the horror of what's happening. We also heard about humans are innovators. Humans are problem solvers. We need to appeal to that part. We have done this before. We can do it again. Not on our watch. We're in this together. Thank you very much. Stay and ask questions. Thanks, everybody.